IBTimes UK has come to Manchester, the economic powerhouse of the North West. We're here to find out about the city's regeneration programme. The Hacienda, once a famous nightclub, now luxury flats, is a symbol of that change. But how far has the regeneration spread?
One man who may be able to answer that question is Christian Spence, Head of Business Intelligence at Greater Manchester Chamber of Commerce. The economics expert sat down with IBTimes UK to explain what's been going on in Manchester and the North West since the financial crisis.
Naturally, the urban core at the heart of Manchester city centre has very much driven the economy, but we've also seen things moving wider than just Manchester city centre itself. So certainly the financial and professional services district at the heart of the city centre has continued to grow. We're seeing further development at the Spinningfield site, which has become the heart of financial and business services in the city centre. But other areas too, so the northern quarter on the north side of the city centre there, very different feel to the heart of the city centre, much more independent businesses, much more independent retail and trade. Also a huge focus on digital and creative media at that sector. That's been growing very strongly. I mean, throughout the recession, not only post-recession, but throughout the recession. And digital and creative continues to be a more important driver of the economy.
With the BBC's move to Media City in Salford and the region's long-established relationship with ITV, Spence rightly notes Manchester and Greater Manchester's creativity drive. But what about another important economic measure? What about the region's exports market? Clive Drinkwater, Regional Director of UKTI in the North West, outlines the landscape.
We've got lots of industry sectors that are represented here, automotive, aerospace, but lots of advanced engineering, really clever, really bright engineering companies here. And they're exporting a lot, and since 2008 our exports have continued to grow.
But what is the government doing to help?
UKTI encourages two particular areas in terms of exporting. We're trying to boost the number of exporting firms that we have. So every year I have a challenge to the region to find 1,000 new exporters, and each year for the last 2 or 3 years we found 1,000 new exporters, and that's building the base, which is really important. But then of course one of our key objectives is to work with businesses that are already exporting to get them to do more, and especially to get them to go to some of what you might call the high growth emerging markets of the world.
Two of the firms beyond Drinkwater's base building plan are Whatmore and ACDC. First, Whatmore. The Lancashire firm makes plastic buckets, bowls, storage boxes and planters, which are sold by retailers. Simple, right? But Tony Grimshaw, the director of the company, explained that Whatmore is now exporting to 53 countries across the globe.
We're fairly unique in as much as we didn't export until the financial crisis began. Our export started in 2009, so we're in the midst of the financial crisis. And in that time, we export to 53 countries. Russia, we've just taken Russia on board in the last 2 weeks. Hurdles, none whatsoever. It's the opposite actually. We get so much help from different elements, from UKTI, from the Chamber, from local government, from government, you know, so we're getting, and the banks, we get plenty of help.
But do clients know about the Greater Manchester brand? Louise Franklin, Sales Director of the LED lighting firm ACDC, headquartered in Barrowford, thinks so.
I think they're very much aware of the UK, and naturally people are going to be drawn to London. We do obviously talk about where we're based and being in the north of England, and we're very proud that we're a UK manufacturer associated where we are. And I think really when we start to talk about the business and the location and the experience that we've got around us, then our clients really start to get an understanding of the expertise and the sort of technicalities that we can put into the product.
However, despite these good news stories, Bruce Tever, a professor of innovation management at Manchester Business School, had a different tale to tell. He expressed his worries about the economic recovery's mismatch.
Well, I think there's been a bit of a divide in terms of recovery in the country. So what we see now is the south, and particularly around London, growing very, very fast, and the recovery in the north, Manchester and other areas, being a bit slower. So there's a bit of a mismatch, and I think also the nature of the recovery is something of a concern because it's very much driven by consumption and house prices and things like this. Manchester's a great place to live and to be, but if you look at the longer term, you have to be a little concerned about how there's an increasing mismatch in the country between what goes on in London and the south and what's happening in the north.
In light of the academics' comments, IBTimes UK took to the streets to find out from consumers what they thought about Manchester post-2008 and after its regeneration, following the 1996 provisional IRA bombing of the Arndale shopping centre.
Living in Warrington when the Arndale was blown up, and obviously there's a great deal of work that needs to be done. I think it's sad in many ways that they've done it like an inside centre like that. I think, you know, Liverpool one is much better where it's outside, as well as it's got much more of an atmosphere. But obviously anything they can do to Manchester to attract people is going to be positive.
Since the bomb and since the 90s, I think a lot of development, really, the city centre, there's been a lot of building, really, and I think just the kind of redevelopment's made it a lot more accessible.
I think it has a really good broad scheme of everything, really. I've checked out the restaurants and stuff like this, food courts and everything. It's all really good. Some of the restaurants here are incredible as well.
But how do we keep the economic recovery going in Manchester? Christian Spence argues that a drop in business rates could help firms out. He argues that despite a fall in retail rents outside of prime centres like Manchester city centre, from their pre-financial crisis peak, we haven't seen a commensurate drop in business rates.
Businesses are still paying tax on their premises at the valuation in 2008. So for a lot of businesses now, instead of business rates being the 40 or 50% of their rental value, we're actually finding they're now 3, 4 or even 500% of rental value. That's a huge pressure on local business in terms of it's an input tax you're required to pay whether you're making a profit or not. So that's a big headline issue. And the comparison then with London and the South East, and particularly there where we've continued to see commercial rents rise, is essentially you see almost a transfer of cash from the northern areas and the northern cities down into London, because they haven't yet seen the commensurate increase in business rates they would expect to see. So prime rents for retail in London are still rocketing at 10-15% a year, stronger right at the heart of places like Oxford and Regent Street. So they're now paying business rates relative to their 2008 levels of valuation, which are now up 50 or 60%, where here we're still paying the 2008 valuations despite being down anything between 20 or 80%. So that imbalance between the two regions is certainly holding things back. And for us, whilst the revaluation is a big issue, that's something that does need addressing, the whole way business rate system functions just doesn't feel fit for a 21st century economy anymore.
With Manchester leading the way, it seems George Osborne's Northern Powerhouse plan could become a reality.